Hi there, welcome to 1080's Career Insights. So this week I'm joined by Joe and Gill, and we're going to be talking about cover letters. So this is something that seems to be getting quite a lot of attention on LinkedIn at the moment in terms of if cover letters are still needed, if they're a thing of the past, etc. So as always, please do like, comment and ask questions throughout. I can see one comment's come through already. Okay, so Jeff, hi Jeff. So good morning from Columbus, Ohio, is that, I think. That's great. Thank you for joining. So, as I said, ask any questions as we go through. And we're going to kick off with the very first question, which is, are cover letters a thing of the past? So, Joe, can I head over to you to start that one?
Absolutely not. I think I think that, sorry, not absolutely not, you can't come to me, but are covering letters a thing of the past? Absolutely not. They are more important now, I would say, than ever, because particularly at the moment, recruiters receiving hundreds of CVs, the cover letter is an opportunity to actually differentiate yourself from other candidates. And to really direct the reader to the specific things within your CV that you want highlighted and that closely match the job. So very, very important.
Excellent. And Gill, anything to add to that?
I think absolutely I would agree. And I will speak from the recruiter's point of view. When I was working recently doing some recruiting with some people I know, and we had several CVs for a particular post, which was in social media marketing, and it was so difficult to differentiate that we actually requested, when we did our second wave of advertising, a 500-word cover letter showing how their experiences on a CV matched the job role requirements. Because several things that would actually weed out people who were just shooting off their CV, willy-nilly. But also it would really show how they can express themselves in writing. It brings out a bit of them, and it really does help to differentiate.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. So that's a really good point, actually, isn't it? So a good employer might even tell you what to include in that cover letter. And I know definitely that's the case for sort of things like local governments, things like that. They quite often say, please, let us know how you match against the requirements in that cover letter. So yeah, that's a really good point.
And I've got another example of that, actually, that my son recently was trying to recruit someone new within his consultancy, and he did it through LinkedIn and received literally hundreds and hundreds of applications and kind of didn't know where to start with the sifting process. So he went back to everybody and said, I actually want a covering letter. And within a space of a couple of minutes, received hundreds of covering letters. So he immediately discarded all those people because they were just shooting out a standard covering letter rather than something that had been written and prepared and was bespoke to the actual role that he was looking at. So yeah, as you were saying before, I think the covering letter is an opportunity to really match the role rather than just a standardized covering letter of introduction.
Excellent. So just like we've been talking about in previous sessions with the CV and making sure that you tailor the CV for the role, exactly the same for the cover letter. So making sure that it is tailored, picking out keywords and your kind of experience to that person. Okay, that's great. So next question then. So how should the cover letter be structured? Gill, would you like to start on that one?
Well, I think, first of all, it's really to think it through beforehand. So with an opening paragraph, it's about what's really interested you, why are you actually writing to them and applying without actually saying, I am writing to you, which I know is difficult because that's the words that immediately come into our mind is I'm writing to you, which is sort of obvious. So if you like the why, then I think also the how you match what they're looking for, which say might be about 4 bullet points, could be 3, could be 5. So between 3 and 5 bullet points about how you are suitable for the role. And that should really be, those bullet points, be directly linked or directly from your CV, and then will take their eye to that portion of their CV. So you're making it easy for them to look at the right pieces of your CV. And then really finally is what you can bring, if you like, how you'll help them solve their problems, what value you will add. Because again, it's people do what's easy. And if it's me or any of my clients, I get them to make sure that they include things like, you might have got your telephone number on your CV, but don't take that for granted. Don't make them click through to that to find your phone number or your email. Actually embed it in the letter. People do what's easy. Make it really simple for them to contact you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great point. So all about signposting, really, isn't it, to relevant information? Jo, anything to add to what you just said?
Yeah, just I suppose simply that opening paragraph or opening sentence, you know, why you're writing. I guess that's all about really doing your research on the company before you approach them. Because you may be able to find a link or a hook in, like you've seen that there's been a recent merger within the company, or they've relocated, or they've suddenly expanded, or they've suddenly moved into a different area of work. So that would give you a reason for writing. And another reason as to why their company is of particular interest to you. So definitely, as Gill said, you know, do a lot of thinking and research before you approach anybody. I think we're going to talk about speculative laters in a while, but
yes,
definitely, if you know, in any instance, even if it's just to an advertised job, research the company before you write the covering letter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know sorry, Jo, carry on.
Sorry. And just secondly, in that final signing off, as Gill says, you know, embed things in the letter, maybe, you know, the link to your LinkedIn profile, your phone number, and making it easy for them to find you. And also thinking about how brave you are at the end of that letter. You know, what is the outcome? What is the reason for writing this letter? It's because you want them to notice you and you want them to make contact with you. But if you're very brave, you know, you might say, I will follow this up with a phone call, or, you know, I will, you know, chase up the organization, or however you want to word it. Rather than just saying, I do hope my details will be of interest to you and look forward to hearing from you, because, you know, that's not strong enough. That's not pushy enough, I have to say. But
it's like a call to action.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think we have to remember that fortune favours the bold, and it does pay to be bold without being pushy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention about formatting. So when I'm working with my clients, I tend to use the same header at the top of the CV and the cover letter, so that they look the same, so that the reader sees that it's from the same person without even reading the details. So I tend to have sort of name, job title you're looking for, LinkedIn URL, and sort of brief contact details at the top, and then just basic things like making sure you're using the same font on both letters, just to build up that consistency. So I see we've got a couple of questions coming through. So Jeff has said, are cover letters like resumes in that you only get a few seconds to catch someone's attention? So
absolutely.
Gill, yeah,
absolutely they are. And it is that what I call that glance appeal. So it's where you look at it and you think, oh yeah, I want to read that, because it's spaced out well. You've got the proper layout for a letter with the, you know, the address is in the right place, the formatting's good. The font, as we've mentioned, be good. There's white space, so you've got a title about what the letter's about. You've got your opening paragraph, then you'll have your bullet points. It's all carefully formatted. Where it looks like that, people will read it because it looks enticing, doesn't it? It looks easy. You sort of think, oh, this looks I'll read it. It's drawing people in. And then when you've got all the embedded things in it, as we've mentioned before, this is again making it very easy for people to take action.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see Jeff's said again, bold equals confident. So yeah, I agree, definitely. Okay, and Alison has asked, how would you cover the fit aspect in a cover letter? So Jo, do you want to have a go at that one?
Are you talking about match? I think Alison, what you're meaning here is, how would you look at what would you include? I suppose there's two things here, really. The fit is the research, knowing the culture of the organization a bit, and perhaps looking at what sort of language they use, and perhaps reflecting that language in your letter and the language that you use. So that's the sort of overall cultural fit. I suppose the more specific fit, if that's what you mean, is actually looking at the job spec and really understanding as Gill was saying, the 4 or 5 key things that they're looking for, and ensuring that you have covered each of those within the letter or fit to the organisation. Yeah, so it's perhaps a bit more about the doing the research and understanding the culture of an organisation.
Yeah, and I think you can find that in more ways, can't you? So obviously the language on the job description is great, and if you can reflect that back, that's really good. But make sure you use LinkedIn to look at the company pages. So I've had a couple of clients recently where they've done all the research on the website, and then I've shown them the company page on LinkedIn, and there's so much more information on there, much more topical, up-to-date things about corporate social responsibility, all of that stuff. So you get a real flavour for the organisation if you do a little bit deeper than just the website.
And it really helps, I think, when you're drawing it to a conclusion, to actually, you can use some of those words and phrases and link again to some other experiences maybe that might be relevant.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we move on to our next question, which is about speculative letters. So how do you go about drafting a good speculative cover letter? So Gill, would you like to start on this one?
I think the first thing is going to be your background research. So who are you writing to? Why are you writing to them? And what outcome do you want? So first of all, it's picking the organisations, and then it's actually finding out who within the organisation. And it's so much easier than it would have been 20 years ago, because we have got LinkedIn, we've got just generally Google search. I always say, ask your friend Google, where you can actually start to find out. Perhaps actually also research if you know anybody who works there or who knows somebody who works there. So you can ask them some question. Who is it you should be writing to? Who's the best person? Absolutely, really, really helps if you can warm that contact up. So you can find somebody that you know that works there, or can put you in touch with somebody. That really helps even more. So having done your research, you can then start to think about it. Now, it's like a cover letter, but obviously what you're probably asking for is for somebody to give you some time for a bit of advice, for some information. Writing to ask for a job, have you got a job, rarely works. But asking for advice nearly always does, because people feel quite flattered when they've been asked for advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this context, speculative letter is kind of applying for a job or some advice for something that hasn't specifically been advertised, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, actually my son did get a job through a total speculative letter a couple of years ago, but I think it was right time, right place. But again, we'd done a bit of research and identified the companies, and so it can work, but admittedly it is few and far between. So Jo, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Direct approaches, I'm finding with my own clients, are really beginning to work now more than ever. And I suppose that's the speculative letter. But I'd like to link back to one of our earlier conversations several weeks ago about informational interviews. It's what Gill was saying, is that if you write a letter saying, hi there, have you got a job? The answer will almost certainly be no. But if you're writing to say, I want to introduce myself, I'm really interested in your company, I can see that you specialize in X, Y, and Z, it's an area I'd very much like to get into. Is there anyone within your team who'd be prepared to have a 10-minute chat with me? And obviously, if you've done the background research in LinkedIn and you can see who works there and look at their profiles and see their background, and maybe you can see what qualifications they've got or what area of work they've come from. But yeah, definitely link it in with the opportunity to have an informational interview with somebody, as opposed to just asking for a job.
Yeah, it's amazing how these things can work, though, because I mean, in my own point of view, a few years ago, and I wanted to do some lecturing in universities, I think I asked people if they knew anybody, had any contacts. I asked around, got several, and then I had one or two myself. And I wrote to all of them, and it was quite a personal letter, because two of them I'd met before, one of them I hadn't, but we had somebody in common. The one I hadn't met before rang up and said, could I do Monday? It was Thursday at this time, which I gathered he perhaps wasn't the most organised of people, but there we go. And the other two, one I got a lot of time from and some really good advice. And the other one, we just had a chat and then things went on. And then I got a nudge to say that there were some roles coming up, which I just went through. That I wasn't a shoo-in because I had to go through a whole selection process, but I was on the front foot. And that made it different. And I was more aware of the culture. I was more aware of the work because we'd had that letter had gone and we'd had that conversation. So they really can work. But it doesn't mean to say you're just automatically going to get the job. You still have to go through a selection process. But you're in a better position than you would have been.
Yeah, it's making you stand out, isn't it? And I guess what we used to say to clients is once you've got the interviewer thinks you can do the job. So this is kind of winning you that interview, and then you need to be able to back it up when you get there. But as you say, research, good quality letters is all going to really help you. Okay, so our next question is, what should you include when you're asked to include a cover letter for a job, for example, the public or third sector? So
actually, before we go on, before we go on, I think one of the things we were mentioning the other day is one of the things that is quite useful is actually to send a letter when it's speculative rather than an email. To send on good quality notepaper in an A4 envelope with your CV, all beautifully done, because people get hundreds of emails, and if they don't know who it's from, may well just delete it before they get to it. So it's to send a letter, and also, if you've not heard, to follow up with a call in a week's time as well. And the letter will be open because it's a novelty.
Yeah, this is a good point, definitely. Okay, so back to that question then, what should you include when you're asked to include a cover letter for a job, for example, the public or third sector? So I think you were about to start speaking, Jo.
Actually, I don't think I was.
No,
I think
okay.
Gill has. We were talking yesterday, and I think Gill was. I mean, what we were talking about was writing. You know, the letter has to match the particular sector or job you're going for.
Right. Okay.
And what we identified. I mean, I always sort of encourage clients to write fairly short covering letters. I think they should be fairly short and brief. But Jill was saying that perhaps in the public or third sector, sometimes there's a very different sort of letter that has to be written. So over to you, Jill.
Yes. Well, if you're looking at a senior level, they'll probably be about 3.5 sides of A4. So they are quite a lot longer. And it really is, I think, to lay out your wares about how you meet the person spec and how you could fulfill the job description. Again, from my own experience from screening some of these letters in my time as chair of governors of a very large brand new school, I have screened lots and lots of them. So again, it's about making it easy for people. So it's giving it a lot of thought. And while you may have a master letter, as this is the norm in that area, you put together a master letter, you will have to rework it for every single application you do to make it very, very specific. And it's making sure that you actually do it in some form of sections, because when you're screening longer applications, the poor old screener really needs some help, So three-sided essays get to be quite heavy going to read and do them justice. So it's taking aspects of the person spec, or perhaps the job description, and breaking it into perhaps chunking them up. So you've got about 3 or 4 subtitles in the letter. You might even write it under more subtitles than that, but to avoid looking a bit choppy and like just a business report, you may take some of the subtitles out later and just leave them as paragraphs. But by having subtitles in, it really helps the people reviewing it. It helps them match your criteria to the specification. And it helps you move from the in with everybody else pile to firstly the long list, if they've got one, and then to the short list. So you're getting closer to an interview with having a well-structured, well thought out, with all this signposting with some headings in it as you go through.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'd just add there. Sorry, Sarah, to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
We're talking there about public or third sector. I think also we have to remember and remind everybody at this stage that obviously every industry and every sector does have its own style. So if, for example, you were, you're within media, or within PR or something like that, you might want to add links to any creative writing you've done, or a sort of portfolio of things you've written before, which aren't necessarily part of your CV, but they're sort of add-ons. And I think at this stage they do come under the umbrella of the covering letter, sort of additional things that you want to put forward as part of your application. But it very much depends on the role you're going for. Obviously, there might be links to something you've done live, or anything. But all those, as Gill was saying earlier, if you embed those links within the body of the letter, so it's easier for the reader to find them.
Yeah, that's great. And I was just going to say, I know sometimes, particularly with public sector, you might not be allowed to send a cover letter or CV. But I guess these principles relate to that box at the back that says, please tell me anything else about you. And I guess that would be the sort of a cover letter there, wouldn't it? So those kinds of principles.
They normally give you half a side, but what they actually expect, it's a bit cruel, really. This is about customer practice. What they expect is a lot more than half a side. So depending on the level of job you're going for, they would probably accept 2 sides of A4 or maybe longer to really show how you match what they're looking for. So it's a lot of effort goes into it. What most people do is as I said, they have a master letter, but it has to be reworked every single time. So it is a lot of work to apply for these roles.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And definitely for the public sector ones, I remember a client who was going for a role that was in a certain competency area and with different levels. So honestly, it took about 5 or 6 hours just to get all of the information so that she could demonstrate her level within that competency and not just the competency itself. But she did get an interview. So, it was worth it, but it was very complicated and long-winded.
Yeah, I think that's, hopefully, I would think that was exceptional.
Yes.
I think most people leave it a bit broader than that.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this sort of relates a bit to what you were just talking about, Gill. So should the cover letters be sent in the body of an email or as a separate attachment? So, Jo, thoughts on that?
Yeah, we actually have had quite a bit of debate about this as to what's the best way of doing it. And I think the conclusion was maybe belt and braces. And the email itself is a cover letter, but you can have the cover letter as an attachment too. So going back to what you were saying earlier, though, Sarah, is to make sure there's consistency between the style and the font and all the rest of it. But I think that's what we decided, wasn't it, Gill?
Yes, yeah, I think so, because we had the debate, because again, it's people do what's easy, and if you want them to read it, then you could do it in the email, but then again, it just looks nice. It just shows that professionalism and preparation if you've got it as a separate document as well. So we did have this base, because I sometimes think people have got a lot of applications. Will they be bothered to click through onto the cover letter?
Yeah. But I guess the other thing is, from, again, going back to formatting, if you include a cover letter and a CV in an email, then making sure they're PDF so that you know what they're going to look like, and they can't be manipulated and all of that kind of stuff. So again, that's really good practice to make sure that when they are open, they look how you want them to be. So yeah, but I think it's a good idea to put the cover letter as the email and then attach it as a PDF as well. So yeah, that's good. Okay, Jeff's asked another question about links. So is a link the best way to include any media, video, audio that you may have? How do you ensure that the links get used? So, I mean, I guess I would include a hyperlink or something to the page that you're going to, so then it's obvious to the reader that there is a link there, they can click on it, assuming that they're opening it electronically, I guess. And I would also go to my LinkedIn profile to get people to look there. But anything else to add to that, Gill?
No, I would do the hyperlink as well, because then people can just click on it, because it is what's easy. That's what they'll do.
Yeah. And And I guess you could even call that out in the email as well, potentially. You could just say, I've added some links in my cover letter, but here you go. If you want to look at this video of me in action or whatever it is, then here's another link to it here. So again, repeating it.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And also, it's making it easy. If they can see you in action, see an example of your work. I've had clients where we've discussed taking where it's possible and it's not breaking confidentiality, taking examples of work. I've done it myself, taking examples of work, because many people don't. So it's another differentiator, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just trying to think of an example, but I'm sure I did have a client who had to take a presentation she'd done previously to kind of represent her work. And I know sometimes then get into the actually, am I giving away my knowledge for free? So I guess there's a bit of a issue there potentially, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that, Jo? How much to give away?
Yes, absolutely. I think you have got to be careful to a certain extent on that. And what was springing to mind there also was about confidentiality, because particularly sort of working with people who've been in M&A, for example, they produce a very short one-page resume and then have a separate deal sheet, which may or may not. Well, obviously it's got to be public information that it's something that you would add on possibly as part of your cover letter. I don't know, but again, as a separate document, that sort of additional information that isn't part of the initial CV or resume, and also wouldn't be on your LinkedIn profile, for example.
Yeah. Have you had any experiences of that, Gill, when maybe clients are not sure about how much to give away?
Probably, I think if we've been worried, we've erred on the side of caution, although I'm somebody who says fortune favours the bold. And we found another way to demonstrate, if you like, capability. But normally when it's been where we have been able to utilise something, it has been something that's been non-contentious. But it has made a difference.
Yeah, good. Okay. Just got another comment back from Jeff. So he's saying it's a good point, and that's why he has a special section on his LinkedIn profile that contains links to being a podcast guest or a LinkedIn live guest. So Jeff is a LinkedIn guru. So he's got tens of thousands of followers, and is actually going to come on one of my LinkedIn lives next week or the week after, which is great. But yeah, he has a featured section where he can kind of link to things, and that's on the top of your profile. It's a bit like a portfolio, really. So you can include there links to things that you've done, or your website, or company presentations, all of that stuff. So definitely worth using all of that if you can. I see Shannon has sent a question here. So she's saying there are ways of tracking when and who has opened your link. So a simple Google search will help bring up some free options. Excellent. Thank you for that, Shannon. That's good. So we can maybe put a bit more about that in the chat afterwards. So we are pretty much out of time now. So if we head over to our top tip to leave with. So I'm not sure who was going to go first here. Gill, let's say you.
I think whenever you're doing a cover letter, it is a work of art. So making you draft it and redraft the cover letter and read it out loud, because that's where you'll go get a sense whether you've got punctuation in the right places, whether it absolutely makes sense.
Good idea to read it out loud. Yeah. Okay, Jo.
Yeah, my proofread is my number one top tip, and just not rely on spell check, because often spell check is not always right. So absolutely proofread it. Try and avoid jargon or hackneyed or cliched phrases that the ones we've often mentioned before on other sessions, like being a good team player, etc. Try and avoid all that sort of language. And thirdly, I think match the style of the organization as much as possible. So always bear in mind if it's a more traditional organization, or if it's a more a high-tech organization, for example. Try and match the style. But proofread is my number one tip.
Yeah, it's a good tip. And I'm thinking there's something about knowing your audience as well with in regard to proofreading. So if, for instance, someone from the UK is applying for a job in the US, then use the American spelling,
Mhm.
and vice versa. And I know this from, I wrote a post a while ago where I'd written about organisation with an S because, you know, that's my language. And somebody from America had a real go and said, you know, you should proofread your work. This is how it's spelled,
Yeah.
etc. And actually, when I was able to reply and say, well, actually, in my country it's spelt with an S, and she then apologized. But that's the thing, isn't it? Know your audience and make sure that it is correct.
And there's all the etiquette as well around, you know, which is slightly different now. When it was just letters, you know, dear so-and-so, and yours sincerely or yours faithfully, depending on what it is. And now, you know, do you say hi, or do you say, you know, how do you address people? We haven't sort of touched on any of that, but I think it's very much about thinking about, as you said, knowing your audience, and you know, trying to match your style to how you think they would like to be addressed.
Yes.
Important.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Okay, well, that sounds like there's more to think about in another session. So, so next week I will be back and joined by Michael and Hannah, and we're going to be talking about unexpected ways to get a job. So I'm looking forward to this. Apparently, Michael has lots of stories, so who knows what they're going to be. So yeah, look forward to seeing everybody again next week. And Alison saying, great session as always, lady, great top tip. So thank you, Alison. So thank you everyone for joining, and I will go through and answer any of those questions again afterwards. If you have any more that you haven't asked, then please do feel free to add them, and see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.